ask you, what I use the video for basically is to do some bonus material on the podcast. So if
Okay.
you're okay with me using it for that, I thought I would just check with you first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And anything you like, it's fine.
Great. So how is your quarantine time going so far? How have things been for you and your family?
The family's been great. I mean, we have three boys. One is or one is 18, one is 16, one is 14, and they get along at the best of times. But we were kind of concerned about the confinement and how they would be just being guys, and they've been really good. My eldest just came back from university. We had to get him early because of the crisis.
Mhm.
So he was a bit bummed that he couldn't finish out his first year. And so we were sort of wondering how is this going to play out now that he's going to be stuck at home as well, too. But it's been great. And my wife is, as always, lovely. For me, it's just been, I am working from home and now, so the studio's in the living room. And I'm going to go back. We've already sort of finished all the isolation rules and the quarantine rules. So I'm going to go back Monday. But for the last 5 weeks, I've been waking up in the morning, going downstairs, grabbing a coffee, and then sitting in my living room and, broadcasting a morning show to Toronto. My life's dream has always been to do a morning show in Canada's, top city. And I never thought that I'd ever be doing one from my living room. It's just so crazy, but super fun and super different. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely a different way of living for sure.
For sure.
So how long have you been in Toronto now?
I came out here in 97 from Vancouver and initially went to do a morning show in a station in Burlington at Energy 108 it was called. And then that kind of took me to through Chorus Entertainment, the company, and various opportunities, took me through Hamilton doing mornings, and then coming back to Toronto to do mornings in country in the early 2000s, then at a soft rock station. So I've been kind of all over the place, but at Boom, I've been doing it now. As a matter of fact, it's an anniversary this week. Friday will be my 9th year since signing on to do mornings there. So Toronto as a whole since 97. And although that time now, because you get married and you have kids and it's just flown by. Like I can't, it's like, 97 seems like it should be 5 years ago, and it's not, right? It's a long time ago.
I understand. And where are you from originally?
I was born in Richmond, BC, just outside of Vancouver, and I was raised in Winnipeg. I left there to begin my radio career in Yorkton, Saskatchewan in 1979. And since then, I've been back to Winnipeg to visit. Not enough, but I still consider that place my home.
Wonderful. So you probably got to see a fair amount of the country over the last years, I'm sure.
For sure, yeah. The first
I'm coming
part was
from Edmonton.
west. Yeah, I know. I've been in Edmonton. I worked there too. In 1987, I was at K97, but very briefly, a year and a half maybe, and then it was back to Vancouver again. There's been a radio, TV, or TV mixed into my radio life, and radio's always been a love, but TV sort of set it on a different track, and found me doing a lot of traveling, particularly in the West. You're right. I mean, it's a blur. I remember, I had a house in Edmonton, and I cannot tell you what the address was, what area it was in. It's just gone by so fast. There's a bit, but man, when I think about Edmonton, I was there for the Gretzky trade. I did the morning show the day after he was traded to LA, and I'll never forget my time there and how that city was so choked. It was,
yeah.
And I was and still am a Toronto Maple Leaf fan. So, but I understood his greatness, but I could not believe that was a city in mourning. And I thought, wow, yeah. That's a player that has a stranglehold on its population, and it's more than just hockey. It was like Gretzky is Edmonton, and that's that.
And the thing was, I think I was about 9 or 10 years old at the time when it happened, but I'll never forget how emotional it was for everybody.
Yeah, and the lashing out. I mean, I forget what the name of the Edmonton Sun News columnist was, but he's lashing out at Janet. It's her fault. It's like Yoko breaking up the Beatles.
Yeah,
oh my God. Oh no, you guys gotta settle down here. It's okay. But
and there's been TV specials about it. There's been so much since that happened, where I think we can all look at it now, I hope, as adults and realize what the actual circumstances were.
That's right. You
But
know what?
there's
It
still
wasn't that
people,
bad. Yeah, he
there's
still likes those.
yeah, still people to this day who blame her, and it's just ridiculous.
Oh, it's crazy. And that was on that though, that was so Canadian. I mean, he was in Los Angeles, but he's staying at Alan Thicke's place, babysitting Robin. Like, I mean, it's so great. While helicopters are flying around all over the place, he must have been, what the hell is going on?
Yep. No, it's unreal. Unreal. Was that, I think shortly after that, he hosted Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I think it's in around the same time too, right? The surf where it was the Elvis Presley surfing movie or something like, or Elvis Presley is a hockey player or something like that. It was god
It
awful,
was
but still
really
remains
bad.
one of my favorite moments.
The poor guy cannot act, but
No,
man,
you can't.
it was hilarious. Oh, thank you for bringing back those memories. That was
Yeah, sorry.
no, that's great. It was great. And one thing I was doing, looked at your Wikipedia.
Hmm.
One thing I noticed that wasn't there was Switchback.
Right.
Switchback.
That's
No.
yeah. That is, and I'm not sure about how Wikipedia works. I had someone that was I should say I had someone. Somebody was on my behalf was updating it, who was a fan. So I thought, good, better than a fan to do all that. And I still found all the information was wrong. And I still get people wishing me happy birthday, in September when my birthday's in May. And well, thank you, appreciate it. But yeah, Switchback was a branch of the CBC tree that I did not see coming at all. Well, mind you, I didn't see the Good Rockin Tonite branch coming either. But while doing that show, they had replaced their host, or were looking to replace their host, and asked if I would do a show. And the thing about that time that I remember so well now is that I was really just young and stupid, and just young and stupid enough to not be nervous about anything, right? I mean, it was sort of like everything was an adventure, and I was all in, and I never took any time to sort of think about the magnitude of what you're doing. I only hear it now. People say, I watched that show when I was a kid. I never missed an episode. And like, you were there every Sunday morning, and it was so fun to see it. And I knew I was doing it, but I had no idea, what effect it was having on people. And the same thing with Good Rockin'. People say I grew up with that. It was Friday night for me, and if I was going out, I would tape it and then get home and watch the videos of VHS and enter all the contests and all that stuff. And I'm like, wow. And they say it was such a part of, when they talk to me about it, they say it was such a part of my life, and thank you for doing that. And I had no concept of that while I was doing it. And so only now when it comes back, it makes the memories that much better of that.
No, and that's understandable too. At the time, I don't think you realized the effect it had on Canadian pop culture as a whole.
Right. Which is when people put me into that category, I'm like, wow, like, thank you. It was a video show and a kid's show to me. But when they talk about how and what it meant, it was sort of like, wow, well, okay, then. I mean, I'm not actually up there in Mr. Dress Up category, but I'm in, I'm there.
But that's some serious CBC legacy though, because when you think about it, there's two things I remember for music video shows. It was video hits. Of course, there was the before Dan Gallagher and the after Dan Gallagher.
Right.
And Good Rockin' Tonite.
Yeah, Sam Taylor. I remember Sam. I have a picture. I should have grabbed it for you. I completely forgot. I have a picture of Sam and I when we were out I was out at CBC Toronto. We were doing just publicity photos, and it was her wearing her video hit sweatshirt and me wearing my Good Rockin' Tonite sweatshirt. We've got our arms around each other. the product, like the hair, it's just, oh my God, can you get any more product in there? And the makeup and the whole bit was just so over the top. But it's one of my favorite pictures. That was a snapshot in time for sure.
You had incredible hair.
Oh man, as one person, I coached my boys hockey. And there was a guy that was coaching with me who said, I was explaining to his son the show that I did. And the son kept staring at my head, and he goes, yeah, he had more hair back then. He said he had national hair. I thought, yeah, I like that one, man. Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. So yeah, I was with Switchback. What I remember is that I remember there was two hosts, and I think it was based out of Calgary, the episodes that we would see here.
Right.
Keith and Ian were their names.
Right.
It blows my mind that I can even remember that. But what was the deal with that? Was Switchback different hosts in different cities,
It
or?
was. It was initially, if I'm not mistaken, it was different host in each of the capital cities across the country. But then cutbacks and streamlining, or whatever they called it, they sort of grouped them together. So Winnipeg the one in Winnipeg might have been taken care of, or taking care of all the eastern provinces east of Winnipeg. And then for me, suddenly Switchback wasn't just Vancouver anymore. It was all of BC and all of Alberta. And then at that point, it was there for another, I guess, 4 or 5 seasons or so before it finally wrapped up.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I don't even really remember the premise of the show that much. I think they had music videos.
Yes, it was a whole lot. And this is the other thing, but being the Good Rockin host, Good Rockin was more than willing to give us all the countdown videos and all of that stuff. So we would basically do a rehash of the top 20 videos and albums in the show. It was at least our show was a mad prize giveaway. We had a live audience. And it's so funny that you bring this up, because just like yesterday, I remembered a specific show where they had a live tiger brought in. And the kids were blown away, and it was like, oh my God, it's a tiger and whatever. And the tiger was on a leash, and the woman that was controlling it seemed to be in perfect control. But I remember thinking, oh my God, if that tiger decided to go tiger, could you imagine? And I thought, but we got away with so much, and they did such, it was like, as a friend of mine said, he said, I used to love tuning it in on Sunday morning just to see the big guy go nuts, because that's what it was. It was just for 90 minutes, you're going 150 miles an hour, and then it comes to a screeching halt. It was like kids, so you got to keep kids' attention. And boy, it was pretty wild, pretty effective.
Very energetic show.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Now, how did you make the switch over to Good Rockin Tonite as you were taking over the reins from Terry David Mulligan? That's
Terry
like
David
yeah. He's a legend.
Yes,
right?
He's a legend. Still is. Yeah. He. I don't really know the whole story. I know that when he started it, he did it for 1.5 years, and I think he was either looking for a better deal or not a better deal. Sorry, just a longer term. Because at that time, I think the contracts were only 6 months, or 3 months, and you were lucky to get a 6-month. Because the show was done in Vancouver, the mountains acted as a great barrier to the rest of Canada, particularly Toronto. I mean, Toronto was doing Toronto things and really, didn't pay too much mind to what was happening everywhere else. And it's typical Toronto fashion, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, we do our thing here, and whatever you're doing over there, I'm sure it's very nice here. Have another 3 months. And ratings kept going well. So the show continued 3 months, but I think Mully wanted something a little bit longer, I think. And CBC wasn't prepared to offer that, I guess. And I think Mully had just got an offer of Much Music. So he was fine. And then the call went out to look for a new host. And I prior to doing this, I remember I was working at a radio station in Regina, and I was doing the evening show. And there was a post on our bulletin board that CBC were looking for a host for a show called The Fame Game. And I was looking at it, I'm kind of shaking my head going, oh, okay, well, who's ever going to do that? Good luck to you. And the guy that was doing afternoons at our station, Dave Mitchell, saw me looking at it, and he said, are you going to go? And I said, no. And he said, well, I'm going. So if I'm going, you have to go. So I said, okay, fine. Here's the young and stupid kicking in. I don't know what I'm in for, so whatever. So I went to CBC Regina for this audition. They set you up in quite a small room, and the production assistant is sitting there. She's got a stopwatch, and she says, all we want you to do is look right down the camera lens, talk for 5 minutes without stopping. You can't, if you use as few ums and ahs as you possibly can, but we want to see how you go. So I said, sure. And then they rolled camera. I started talking about the only thing I knew, which was radio, and how I got into radio, and da-da-da-da-da. And then I was just wrapping up, and I said, I guess that's about it. And she hit the stopwatch, and she said 4 minutes and 57 seconds. So I went, wow, that's cool. And I didn't give it another thought. And then 3 days later, I got the call from the producer of the show saying, you're the guy, we want you to host the Fame Game. And it was a battle of the bands. Each capital city across Canada submitted bands from their province. They would duke it out, and then everybody would go to the national final. So I hosted the Regina edition. Boy, and you want to talk about hair then, oh my God, I still have the VHS tape, and it is like, it's about here, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then because of that, the producer at Good Rockin, Ken Gibson in Vancouver, had a copy of that, saw me, and said, would you like to come down for an audition for the show? So I did, and I thought it was just an audition, but it was an actual show that we were doing. So I was a little like, okay, so this is, and I didn't realize that till after we were finished. I said, so this show, this is like going on the air like next Friday? And he goes, yeah. So I thought, this is it. I got to phone everybody, tell everybody I'm going to be on national TV for the first and only time in my life. You cannot miss this. And then the show aired, and we got letters like crazy saying, hey, that's a good dude, keep him. And after a couple of months, I guess, of auditioning others and deciding, David Foster hosted a show. Bruce Allen hosted a show. Platinum Blonde hosted an entire show. Loverboy. And I thought, okay, well, I'm up against this competition. Forget it. These guys will get the gig. I'm out. And then Ken called me and said, it was Halloween. I'll never forget it. I'm just handing out candy to kidneys to kids. I'm handing out candy to kids at the door. Phone rings, and he says, note the time and the date. He said, you got the gig. And the kid that was at my door, I'll never forget it. He had his sack open. I took the whole bowl of candy, dumped it in his pillowcase, went, see you later. I'm going out to celebrate.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that was it. But I had the same thing as Molly. 3 months. And I loved radio, and I could not crack the Vancouver market to save my life. And in looking back at it now, it's because I wasn't good enough, but I didn't know that then. And I wanted a little more security, and they couldn't offer it. And then suddenly, though, things started going really well for the show. And then it was 3 months became 6 months, and then we started getting year deals. And then we knew we were in for something. So Molly for a year and a half, and me for 8.5 years. So that's a pretty long run for CBC and a variety show. I don't think they've had one that's run that long since then. So we're pretty proud of that.
That's an incredible run.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I had no idea it was that long. I specifically remember I was watching the show around 1990 to like 1992.
Right.
Right in there, religiously. That was my Friday night. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. We got into some really cool stuff too. We started going on movie junkets. And it was great because we were just a presenter. We would say, here is the new Tom Cruise movie. We didn't critique it. We just said, here it is. Talk to Tom about it. Talk to any of the co-stars about it or whatever. So you always got great interviews because they knew you weren't like, I'm not judging. I'm just saying, hey, tell me about your role, So, and those went over really well. That was a whole new avenue for me in terms of trying to work on my interview skills and realizing that there are people, that have a whole lot of power, and a whole lot of people are hanging on to their every word for whatever reason. And that there was a different kind of respect that you had to hand out back then, even though in some cases you'd be talking to people who didn't deserve it. There was it was almost like a royalty. You felt like, okay, you're just TV. These people are big screen. So know your role, do your gig. And although some were magnificent, there were others that, could be quite unkind and quite, definitely a test to your mettle.
Yeah, no. And I think that's one thing that I was thinking today was like, wow, I'm going to be for the first time interviewing an interviewer. so I was really nervous about that, as I'm very green at this.
I hope you're not, and you're doing great. I found somebody asked me about what was the thing that, that you would offer in terms of advice for interviewers. And first of all, the fact that they come to me for advice blows me away. 1, 2, I did a lot, but my early ones I wasn't good at. It took me a while to figure out how to do it. And my style, if you can call it that, was, and this is, you've heard this too, I know you have. People say the best part about an interview, or the most important thing, is to listen. And it sounds simple, but a lot of people will go in with 10 questions, and they're going to ask those 10 questions come hell or high water. And maybe I'm answering question 1 and I'm leading you down a path that might be more interesting than your question 2, but you're not listening. You're going to go to question 2 right away, right? So you miss what is being said.
It's like you cut off an opportunity. Yeah,
for sure. And mine has always been conversation. If it's not a conversation, it's no fun. And, and you can be the best interviewer in the entire nation, but if you have a tough guest and it doesn't become a conversation, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not getting anything, and what you will get is, I remember, I don't know how many hundreds of people I interviewed. I can remember on one hand, the 5 that I was so mad at and so hurt. And so, because it didn't go well, because they were jerks or I wasn't prepared or whatever. and I, truth be told, I never liked doing it. I was always ready, but I never liked doing it. I found, I don't know, it got to a point where so many bands were coming out so fast and so quick, and you knew that some were going to be around and others weren't, and it kind of hurt your feelings to know that, look, guy, you really want to say this is a great album, but what are you going to do after this? And you felt bad for them. Sometimes, the stories that they would tell would be not upsetting, but just kind of, I know too much. I don't think I want to know this is my favorite band. I don't think I want to know this about you. You know what I mean? So lots of that. It made me sort of, whenever somebody said, here's our interview schedule for this week, I'd be, okay, all right, here we go. But through that, though, I made some incredible friends still today, that we talk and follow each other and send hellos out to. Corey Hart used to phone me on my birthday every year. We still in touch. By the way, the guy is quarantining in the Bahamas or something right now. Okay, so he's got.
Oh, how terrible for him!
I know. He's got a couple of places, I think, and I just got a note from him by our program director. He said he's taking it easy, and yeah, I'm sure you'll be fine, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I was gonna say, kind of segues into when you did interviews. Did you write the questions yourself? Did the CBC tell you what you could and couldn't say, or did you have to?
Yeah, to a point, but and always within reason. And yeah, most of them were mine. Our producer had a real knack for what Ken's big thing was, if we were sitting down to do or preparing to do a big interview, like Duran Duran when they just hit in 1984. I was flying out to Toronto to interview him. It was actually my first big interview, and they combined a photo shoot with it. So with everybody standing around, I'm waiting in the hotel room for Duran Duran to come in, and they want to take publicity shots with like everybody standing around, and I'm so self-conscious, and they're snapping away, and you got to smile more, relax more. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm thinking, I got to do this interview. It's more important than this. And they're making postcards out of it, right? Whatever. So all of that is happening. But before we went out, Ken and I were on the phone probably for, a good hour and a half, throwing out questions. And I would come up with a question and he'd go, no, that's pretty typical. Why don't we go this angle here? What I want to try and do is ask the stuff that nobody else is asking, or try and find stuff that nobody else is asking. Mm-hmm. So it became a battle between him and I, because I kind of knew, he wasn't sitting there, I was sitting there. So, and there were questions I wasn't comfortable asking. I don't want to talk about girlfriends. Like, I don't want to know who you're dating. That's not my thing, right? But he says, you are broadcasting this show out to however many hundreds of thousands of people every week that want to know if they have a girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, fair enough, but I don't want to be the guy to ask that. Mm. So it's like, we would go back and forth on that. But he was, oh God, he was so unbelievably helpful. We flew out to, please, anytime interrupt. I get memories and I just go down memory road.
That's exactly what I'm here for. Continue.
Okay. We were going to the UK to do a week's worth of interviews with Brits, and Phil Collins was one of them. And on the plane, on the way out, he was sitting behind me, and I was looking at the schedule, and I'm looking at who we're interviewing, and some names I didn't even recognize, and then other names I see Phil there. That's great. And then he taps my shoulder, and he hands me 3 foolscap sheets of questions for Phil Collins, and some of them were just brilliant. And he maybe worked on it for 10 minutes. Like, he had a real knack. And I remember sitting there talking to Phil, and I would skip over a couple of the questions that he had. I wasn't quite there yet, and then come back to them later and stuff. And at the end of the interview, Phil said, that was really enjoyable. Thank you so much. And he said, it was like I was talking to, it was like we were having just a little conversation. And I was out on the street at a place called Shepherd's Bush. And I felt like, I felt like a king. And I remember, driving to our next interview and thanking him for, making me look good. There were so many ways that I could have really messed up on that show, and he always made sure I looked the best I could. So, and sounded the best I could. I'm forever indebted to him. And by the way, he turned 80, I think, or maybe more, a few years ago, and invited the crew back to his place. He's got a lovely place in West Vancouver, or Point Grey in Vancouver. He had parties before, but I couldn't make it. I could never figure out the time. This time I made it. He didn't know I was coming. I came downstairs, and it was great to see him. We're hugs, and he's crying. He says, I can't believe you made it. And then, of course, who walks in 5 minutes later? Mulligan, because he's got to make an entrance. He knew I was coming. But it's sort of like, damn it, man, I'm going to be the last one in there. So it's like, yeah. So it was really cool. But he God, he helped me so much. And then through him, I became better. And then I realized that, yes, you can ask questions that are kind of uncomfortable, but give it your style. Don't go with somebody else's. If, you know, and that was one of the things I learned from Ken. And never, ever, if you can avoid it, you know, ask a yes or no question. Make sure that make sure that they can't answer yes or no when you're going to the next one, because you've probably been down that road too. You ask a question, they give you a one-word answer, like, okay, I got nothing else.
And then you feel stuck.
You feel stuck, exactly, yeah.
One thing, it's like, I appreciate the fact that you can find questions that make the artist go, wow, I never thought about that before. Thank you for asking. Because I worry that they get so tired of hearing the same thing over and over. And even in this format where I'm talking to them about things that happened 20, 30 years ago.
There's still,
now it's not so hard to do that. More of a reminiscing quality to it.
Yeah, for sure. It's a nostalgia quality to it. So yeah, and more than, and you find 9 times out of 10, I think they'd be more than willing to talk about it. But you're right, back then, and even now, it's still the same to this day. I mean, I'm sure music guys get asked the same questions. I mean, I remember one band telling me, God, if I get asked what comes first, the lyrics or the music, one more time, I'm going to lose my mind, you know? And or how the band got their name, which, by the way, I never asked either one of those questions. I used to hate that question. How the band, that's lazy to me, but
you know what I've been doing? I've been saying to myself, look, if I can find the answer on Wikipedia, I'm not asking it.
Bingo. Like, if you know it, and if you can, then that means everybody knows. And if everybody knows, why would you bother, right?
And then it's like,
go ahead.
Sorry. When you're watching these events where fans ask questions.
Yeah.
No disrespect to some fans, but it's like, are you seriously asking them that?
I know. And
you have this one moment.
Yeah. That was another thing that, you know, and I know that interviewers do this all the time. They say, I got some questions from fans, and they hold up the paper, right? But there's no questions from fans. These are the questions you don't want to be the one that's at the ask these questions. You can blame it on a fan, right? And then you get all the good people do that all the time.
Really?
It's like, a fan wants to know boxers or briefs, you know, and you're like, oh, come on, really?
The worst.
The worst. The fun, though, I mean, in that, for me, it didn't happen that often. But the times that it did happen, I can remember vividly. Janet Jackson, her before it was Rhythm Nation tour, and it was a backstage interview. And she, by the way, I still will never forget how stunning she is. Like, she glows. Janet glows, and there's seemingly no makeup or anything. She smiles, and you're like, oh my God, this, in not only the room, but my soul has lit up. Like, she is this, it's captivating. Like, you're like, you want to say, oh my God, you're stunning. I'd asked the crew, I said, how is the tour going and something? And I was saying, is there anything that Janet doesn't want to talk about? I don't want to tread on any delicate territory. And they said, no. She's pretty happy these days. She just got a horse or something like that as a gift for her birthday. And I just sort of jotted that down. And then in the interview, I brought it up. I said, so I understand it is your birthday. Happy birthday. And you're the proud owner now of a new horse. And she looked at me, and again, with the eyes, and genuine, said, how did you know that? And she smiled and then told me the story. But the fact that she did that, and, you know, I said, well, your crew told me, to be honest with you, but I said, I thought it was worth bringing up. To see that honesty and that surprise is like, it's kind of a dream, because you kind of like, I just did something. And of course, we made a promo out of that. We didn't hear my question, but we heard Janet saying, how did you know that? So it makes me sound like I'm Mr. I know everything. You know?
That's cool.
Yeah, really. But, you know, really good. And also when it's over, you know, you can tell that sometimes people come in to sit down and chat, and they're not really wanting to be there. And that used to be a real bone of contention for me. It's like, why, if you don't want to do it, that's cool. Tell your record company, I don't want to do it. Fake sick, do whatever, but don't come in and be miserable and, you know, and waste the time of everybody here because you don't want to talk. If you don't want to talk, don't talk. I don't care. Like, go. I'd rather speak nice of you in your video than have a memory of you being a jerk because you didn't want to be here. And there are times when people come in and you can tell they don't want to be there. And for me, the best moments are when the interview's over and they shake your hand. They go, that was really cool. Thanks. And you're like, okay, that's good. You know, you somehow you think you made a connection, and on that, and I'll make this real quick, but it's just every time you cannot be fooled for a moment as an interviewer to think that what you've done is necessarily memorable. Maybe at that moment you made a connection with the star. But for example, we flew out to Los Angeles to go on the Queen Mary, the ship, to interview Queen, Brian May and Roger Taylor. Freddie was sick at the time, and nobody knew the severity of the illness, but he was sick and couldn't make the trip. They were celebrating Queen signing over to Hollywood Records, a new record label. So we're talking with Brian May, and Brian and I had the most amazing, as I remember it anyway, the most amazing conversation. And when it was over, he goes, "That was really enjoyable. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure." And he was just throwing out all manner of props. And so that great. And I said, "Well, we'll see you later tonight." And he said, "Yep." And there was a celebration on the Queen Mary that night where they would introduce Brian and Roger. The owner of the Disney guy who owned the guy who owned Disney owned Hollywood Records. He was going to make a speech, and then we were going to be treated to this fabulous fireworks display for the song Bohemian Rhapsody, the entire song with fireworks, and it was spectacular. But I arrived there, and everybody was there, and then the announcement came, and the guys came out, and I'm standing along the sort of velvet rope as they're walking by, and I held up my hand because I see Brian, and I think, Brian will recognize me. He'd go, "Hey, man, good to see you again." I held up my hand. He held me his empty glass and said he'd like a vodka and orange juice, please. I'm like, and his publicist was standing right beside him. She looked at me and she went, so I'm like, "Okay, thanks." And that to me was a hard lesson because I could feel the blood rush from my face. Like I just could feel just that however devastated you can feel in a moment like that. And I remember thinking, don't ever think for a moment that just because it was a good interview that they're going to remember you half an hour down the line. Do you have any idea how many people these guys talk to in a day? You know what I mean? What's going to make you special, right? So yeah, that was a hard lesson, but fun. That's still one of my favorite stories. Thank you,
Sobering.
Brian. Very sobering. Yes, and humbling, right? Don't think you're so good there, pal. Now go get him another drink and shut the hell up.
You've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews. Was there ever one where you felt intimidated or starstruck by who you were going to speak to, and you had trouble getting out what you wanted to say?
Oh, yeah. Madonna. And it was for a movie junket. It was for Body of Evidence, which was a god-awful movie. Now, again, oh, God, it was terrible. But she was doing promo for it. And you had the usual 5-minute junket time. And, of course, as I said, we were presenters, so I didn't have to say. As a matter of fact, I could be overly effusive about the movie and say, "You were amazing," right? In the hopes of just getting a good, solid 5-minute interview. So as I waited outside for my turn, and it seemed to be forever, I finally got in, sat across from her, and immediately it didn't occur to me at the moment I don't think I thought who I was going to be talking to. I don't think I gave it enough thought because I sat down, and you can still see on my camera, the camera shooting me, I am immediately disheveled. Like I'm sitting down and I'm not comfortable. I've got my legs are apart. My shirt's kind of half untucked, and my heart is pounding like I've never heard it before. And I think I may have my one and only anxiety attack in the history of me. I don't think I've ever had one, but I think that's what it was. But your head's pounding and my mouth is dry, and she reaches over and she touches my knee and she says, "It's okay." She says, "I'll be gentle. This will be fun." And I remember feeling that was probably even the worst thing that could have happened, because I felt even more like, what are you doing? Like, you are having a full on either starstruck thing or whatever. You've got to get composure. And we we did talk. I have no idea what we talked about. I did take my 5 minutes time, but I had to, when we got back, I had to watch the tape to see what I asked, because I had no idea what I asked. She answered wonderfully, but I'll never forget it. And the only other time, but I knew it was coming, so I was ready for it, was Paul McCartney. He was playing in Montreal, the Flowers in the Dirt tour. And I had often said that two of my favorite musicians are Paul McCartney and Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, and that if I ever got a chance to talk to either of them, and I have had a chance to talk to both, that I would retire. And I remember some journalist did a story on me and said, "So why are you still doing this?" You're right, I guess I should get the hell out. But and he was, and this is Ken Gibson again, my producer, who was good. We worked in my hotel room for 3 hours. We had Paul for 15 minutes. And we worked in my hotel room for at least 3 hours coming up with questions. I mean, what do you ask a guy that's been asked everything, right?
Yeah.
And this came just after this was maybe a week, maybe a little more after that massacre at L'École Polytechnique, the gunman that shot, so the city it was a city in mourning. So it was a very weird time. The vibe was just sadness. And he was aware of that. And I felt that he conducted himself in a very respectful, I got to do the show. But he was so, without even speaking of the incident, you could just tell he was very respectful, and it was kind of cool to see. And so as Ken and I were working on our questions, and he said, well, obviously, we're going to have to talk about the Beatles. And I'm like, oh God, I know he's a Beatle and they're the best, greatest band in the entire world. And yes, everybody loves the Beatles, but he's been asked every Beatle question in the world. And so we went back and forth on this. And my first question was, how, with a repertoire your size, do you come up with a set list that you think is going to make everybody happy, including yourself? Because you have 18,000 songs and you have, you're playing for an hour and a half. How are you going to decide? He answered that question, but took me full circle through everything, like through when the Beatles started, playing the Cavern Club, doing this, doing that. We were actually plagiarists when we wrote this song, and this song. And it was this wonderful 2-minute circle of Paul McCartney and the Beatles from a guy that's obviously used to answering a question like that. And to me, I was like, man, I wanted to stand up and clap, because it was, not only did he take care of 11 or 12 of my questions about the Beatles, I didn't have to address it. He did, and it was magic. And he was the only one, aside from Mark Knopfler, who I asked for a picture. Like now everybody asks for a picture, right? Back then, nobody really did. And I asked for a picture, and he still have it to this day. It's one of my it's so treasured. He's signing some postcards, and I'm leaning right next to him, and he's blowing. He looks like he's giving me the finger, but he's holding a pen. And it's like, man, that's Paul. That's Beatle Paul. Holy crap. So that
doesn't get bigger.
No. And when I look at it to this day, I go, holy shit. Like, I actually talked to Paul McCartney. That is something, man.
You must have moments like that, where you just think about all the people you've gotten the chance to have a conversation with and be like, wow, I can't believe that happened.
So cool you said that, because my wife and I just not that long ago set some renovations done around the house, and one of the things we did was the playroom downstairs, which we called the war room, because it was just so gross. Took us like 11 years to get to it, but we turned it into a spot in where I could hang up a bunch of stuff that I had collected over the years. And once it was all out on the wall, and I remember just sort of standing there looking at it, going, "Wow, that's something." A couple of days later, I had an interview with Tyler from Bare Naked Ladies, just a quick radio drop in, and I said, I just did this a couple of days ago. Have you ever done that, where you hung everything up on, and you look at it and you just go, holy shit, we've done that? He goes, yeah, all the time. And he said, I think it's Canadian. It's almost like, because we feel like we don't deserve it, but we got a chance to do it. So because we didn't deserve it and we got a chance to do it, we should be respectful of it all the time, right? And it's true. And I look at that and I go, none of this happens without Ken calling me that Halloween night. None of it happens without learning how to talk to people and interview people. None of it happens without working on your skills and working hard and being respectful. And so to this day, I am so appreciative when people talk about, every time somebody talks about those shows, that show, or even a radio show, I'm humbled. Like, it's such a beautiful thing that you make a connection with people you don't even know, and you had an effect on their life somehow. Ryan Reynolds, I just saw a clip of him today talking about, he was giving a commencement speech to his Kitsilano former school in Vancouver. And he said, be an empath. If you do anything with your life, and one thing has worked for my career, is that you do something compassionate, do something that has an effect on somebody, however big or small. Be an empath, be sympathetic, build somebody up. Somebody in the industry, in your own industry, somebody doing the same thing you do, build them up, don't knock them down. He said it's just the most crazy ambitious thing that you can do, and it's the best thing that you can do. And I've been trying to live my life that way too. It's just so I'm lucky, and I'm lucky. Sorry, I got all waxed, all philosophical.
That made me feel great just hearing that. Like, Absolutely. And I mean, there's times where we tend to focus on negative things, and I
Oh
mean,
man,
when
Naomi,
you
in
put
this
things in
world,
that perspective.
yeah, in this world, man, it is like now more than ever, right? We need empathy. Like we are divided down the middle, right? When it has never
Mm,
before become so us versus them, and and us versus them. We've all got something in common, right? We all love each other. We're all, we love our families. We love our, we love our
mhm.
country. We love our whatever. Can we not just figure out a way here to make this work? And everybody, we're not always going to agree, but man, like you look what's going on south of the border right now. It's like, I've never been more proud to be Canadian, but we have the same problems too, right? Like, I mean, we've got to be nice. Like, we got to be nice to each other. We got to build. I love that. Just build each other up. We've got to be um, sympathetic to each other. Otherwise, it's the end of us. And I think something like this pandemic is teaching people a few things.
Mm,
Judging from some of the stories that we've had, some people are just not learning, but
yeah.
there are people now that I think I've read today that bird watching is catching on because people are staring out their windows now and just realizing maybe for the first time that that's a pretty bird. I wonder what that is. And then starting to get involved in just the simplest things, right? And those are the things, that, connect us.
We're slowing down and thinking, hey, maybe I should plant a garden.
Yes.
Maybe, like things that
Yes.
are just elementary, and we've just ignored for years and years because things just got too complicated.
Things got too complicated and too materialistic, right? Like and in this instant gratification, back when I was doing the show, people wrote letters. Like there was no email. Like you got letters like in the mail. So I still saved a ton of them. And it's
Send
just
a
something like,
self-addressed stamped envelope
yes,
to.
exactly. That's right. VHS or beta. Like, I mean, it was awesome. And, those simple things have gone because of our lust for instant gratification. And things just happen so quickly. But on the other side of it, you and I can talk, and we were within seconds of hitting a button and connecting from across the country, right? And
Yeah.
and getting to know each other that way. There's nothing wrong with that. Like I didn't know you existed until 2 weeks ago, and now here we are. You're amazing. So and I didn't know you 2 weeks ago. So I did this. This is good. This is great. We just became friends.
And then when I reached out to you, I know I'd been a Facebook friend for a while because I said, it's one of those daily antidotes is seeing one of your posts. You always have something fun or silly to say to make your day. So
Yeah, it's always
I
I
was
always
thinking
try
of
to be
that.
positive, right? I mean, and that Facebook one, that's a cesspool of negativity, just like Twitter.
Oh yeah.
And so I always try to just put in my own, hey. But even I get weak, I mean, there are things that frustrate me so much that I want to post something. I've caught myself before. Sometimes I've deleted tweets and deleted posts just because they're just too angry and maybe whether or not I was justified doesn't matter. I'm just contributing to the problem by doing that, and I try and
Mm,
but we're human, right? We get mad, things annoy us.
yeah. Yeah,
Hop
I
in a
did
car
one
and
of
go for a
those.
drive.
I did one of
Go ahead.
those venting posts last week or earlier
Right.
this week, and then I instantly regretted it with
Yeah,
once you get a couple people commenting that you don't agree with, and then it turns into something it shouldn't have been in the first place, right?
exactly. And all you were trying to do was vent, and there's nothing wrong with venting, but there's like avenues for it and that are better, right? Like
Yeah.
you to the mirror is way better than you to Facebook, right? Because I mean,
Mm,
it's like just get it out. And how many times you're just posting something for fun, and there's that comment down there. Who are you telling? It's pretty mean. You're being pretty mean to people. And you're like, no. I'm like, what? So I we do this thing on the air, and it's not new. Everybody does it. It's Neil Diamond's "Sweet Caroline." You sing the song, and then when it goes "Sweet Caroline," you yell "ba ba ba" in the background. So whenever the song is played, I do that in the background. And again, a million people do it. People love it. They look forward to the song all the time when it happens. I got I got a message by my program director a couple of weeks ago saying I was an anti-Semite, and I'm like,
ah,
what? How is that? He said, because Neil Diamond is of Jewish faith and I'm singing over his song while he sings. So that makes me an anti-Semite. So I'm like, all righty, okie dokie. I guess that's a new one on me. But
I would know how to respond to that. All right.
I know, neither did I. Thankfully, programming did. I wouldn't know what to say. I'd be like, yeah, whatever.
I still have VHS tapes and I'm not a hoarder, but I'm trying to get through these VHS tapes and transfer things onto
Mm-hmm.
digital and get rid of them before they disintegrate into dust.
Right, right.
But still a lot with your show.
Oh, nice.
yeah, like the countdowns and such. I just loved taping all that stuff when I was a kid and some of the interviews. And from this side of the dial, it looked like you had one of the most fun jobs on television. So how much of the creation of Good Rockin' Tonight were you involved in once you were doing it on a regular basis? Like
I got to write the script. Then it was edited, sometimes heavily by Ken, and sometimes not. There were times where I was bang on, and I used to love it when I get a call from him saying, "You've written a fabulous script. This is great." Um, and then and it be able to inject my own sort of humor or style into it. So by writing it, I remember thinking at first, God, I don't know if I could write a show. I mean, I do a radio show, but I don't really write it. And I've never done this kind of thing before. But then all of a sudden, what it does is it gets you into, first of all, show mode, and then it gets you into research mode. And suddenly you're learning things about artists that you never knew before, or certain situations you never heard of before. And so it was great. But the problem was writing to time. So we would have, the interview right off the top of the show might only have a 15-second intro, and that's all the time I have to say, "Hey, how are you? And here's this band, and here's some information." Ken loved it when whenever I opened my mouth to do another segment, that a fresh piece of information would come out. So that was a challenge. And we would do the top 20 album countdown, and the album would come into frame and then come out of frame. So you had maybe a total of 5 seconds, maybe 6 seconds to say in at number 20 Dire Straits and a bit of information. So
yeah.
The whole top 20 was like a vomit of words. It was like I watched one when because I'm doing what you're doing, the digitizing them, right? It's so funny. We've got a box of them. It's been sitting in the box for 1,000 years. We want to digitize them so that we can put those digitized ones into a box for 1,000 years and never look at it anyway, right? But we're whatever. So in doing that, I remember I just watched one where it's like, I did not understand a word of what I was saying because it was going so fast, but that's how he wanted it. He wanted it just to be jam-packed full of information. And he was really good at that. So that was my input. The rest was all production team, and Ken would choose the sort of theme of shows and stuff. They let me have an anniversary show, not my 500th. The 500th, we had a bunch of live bands in and stuff like that. It was really cool when we were signing off. But for I forget what the anniversary was, but he let me play my favorite videos. And some of them were kind of obscure. I remember coming into the
that's fun.
meeting. Yeah, we would go through the script and stuff like that, and I'm doing the intro to all these songs that I like. And Patsy, our director, who I'm still dear friends with, said, "These are some of the worst songs I've ever heard." And I'm like, "Come on, man, it's my favorite." And Ken had to gently say, "This is one thing you do have to keep in mind. We'll play some of these, but some are so obscure, and we have fans that are watching this for, they're watching for the mainstream videos, right? We cannot not play Platinum Blonde. So you although Dire Straits' Skate Away is a fine song, and maybe the video is a little bit dated, maybe we could push that aside and do this instead." So he's very diplomatic about it. Mm-hmm. But that made me realize that, you're not just, it's like, me coming over to your place and you playing me all your favorite songs. Well, that's nice, but I might even like a couple of them. I might even get something out of that. But no, if you're entertaining and a stranger comes over, you're not going to make them sit down and, listen to stuff that you say, "Okay, listen to this and listen to this."
There's got to be some give and take.
There has to be, yes.
Yeah.
So I learned that from him. But their input, for the most part, it was their input. They came up with the themes and the video content, and Ken always took care of the countdowns. He was a chart fiend. He loved charts and numbers. So he was always on top of that. He would, and he printed immaculately. He had the most amazing printing. And every day in his office, I would walk in to go see the top 10, and I wouldn't look in a trade magazine. I would look on his foolscap paper, because that was legit. If there was the chart you wanted to see was legit, I didn't go to Billboard or the Record. I went to Ken Gibson's office to see what was going on. He was pretty good.
Wow. That reminds me, like back in the day, when Power 92 was the station in Edmonton,
right.
A couple kids that I went to school with, my best friends, we did this little show on Sunday mornings called Homeroom Countdown, where they got local kids from around town to come on and do the show and make your own countdown, top 5.
Nice.
I picked the weirdest stuff. Like my number 1 was Extreme Stop the World, which was
Yeah.
off your third album. And I remember one of the guys working the show was like,
what is that song? That's right. Yeah.
And I'm like, it's really good, you guys. It's really good.
Yeah. Exactly. And for radio, man, the Kiss of Death is playing something unfamiliar to your format, right? Like, it's like, as much as you love it, 9,000 people just went click. I don't want to hear it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We got, after that, I think they pretty much told me what I had to do for a countdown, but it was really fun.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun. So fun. And you mentioned a while ago about how it looked like I had the most fun job. I did. There were times where I had to give myself, a bit of a shake because I'm complaining a lot about the work schedule and how I always seem to be working. I'm on call 24/7. And I can't tell you how many times I've been backstage waiting for an artist just to come out to speak to us for 5 minutes. And it's, that gets old really fast. So, there was a while there I became a complainer. Ken would not hesitate to give me a shot to the back of the head with his hand if I ever got to be too much. He gave it to me a couple of times. Not hard, but just to make a note that, you know what, you're doing all right. This is your job. Quit your bitching and let's get to it. As you can imagine, artists that hear the same questions over and over again, that can be the same with interviewers sometimes, particularly with new artists. You have no information on them, so you got to go with a standard set of questions in the hopes of it's going to lead to a conversation elsewhere. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and you're just sitting there going, okie dokie. Question number 2.
And some people make it easy for you if they just love to talk.
Yeah, for sure. And if they've got, and some people love telling stories. I love telling stories. It's great. And and radio this is like my 41st year in radio. If there's one thing that industry has taught me, it's like, people don't have time for a long story. So, especially in this day and age, get to the point, and it's kind of ruined it for me because there are people that would maybe telling me a story and all I'm thinking is you could have probably edited that a little bit more, made it a little more self-contained.
I mean, you spent a lot of time trying to make things compact to fit a format.
Yeah.
And now we're in an age where podcasting has come and had its heyday. I think now it's just, I think it facilitates a better conversation with people.
Agreed.
Having
and
more
you
of an
can't,
open format.
Well, yeah, you don't have to. You and I are talking, and we don't have a time constraint. You know what I mean? Like you're not. So you got 15 seconds. Can you tell me this and this? And then I got to go to a commercial break, and then I'll be right back, and then whatever. Yeah, and isn't that interesting that we've gone from a format? Well, we still have it. Radio is still all about that. Music to the hour and time and formats and things like that. But podcasting has branched out and I think become successful. It's third time around, if I'm not mistaken. It came, it went, it came, it went, it is back again, probably bigger than ever. Because I do think people want to hear stories. They want to, they want information, and they want maybe a little conversation that's a little bit longer than 2 minutes and then another song. Maybe it's just like a friend on the way into work. I can listen to a podcast and feel like I've got a car full of people and we're all just chatting.
Yeah. And I think in a podcast format, you feel like you're more part of the conversation because it's almost like you might have something you wanted to add to that almost.
For sure. Exactly. Yeah. And to be part of that, it's great. And then you find out something, that you didn't know before. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Have you ever been in a situation where you had a co-host?
Not in Good Rockin', and well, we would do every so often. We would have an artist come in that would host a show with me for just that particular show. Corey was there a few times, and Alanis when she was still Alanis.
Yes.
So Alanis was magic on that show. There's just something about her that was just so, I don't know. I guess hindsight's 20/20. I don't think I would have been able to articulate this back at the time, but I did kind of feel that she wasn't doing what she wanted to do. I just kind of, that, and that, now I'm not saying that I knew she was going to come out with Jagged Little Pill. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I felt that the pop world wasn't exactly, fulfilling for her. And I remember the last time we talked to, she co-hosted a show, she played a new video, and I can't remember what the song was, but it was definitely a toughed up Alanis. And I remember thinking, okay, something's coming. Like, this is,
she's breaking out now.
She's breaking out for sure. Yeah. From that Too Hot song to this is like, oh, okay, I see. So yeah, we would have co-hosts on that. Later in my career, when I was doing country, I was hosting a show on CMT called CMT Central. And I co-hosted that show with a couple of people, Lissa Lansdell, and Colleen Rushholm, who I co-hosted the country morning show with, the Country 95.3 in Toronto. Still a very dear friend of mine and a super talent. And it's interesting. I've co-hosted with a lot of people on radio, and it's each experience has been different in its own way, and it's and not for a moment comparing that situation to a superstar band like the Beatles. But here's what I get about the Beatles, and why it didn't last long, and why they seem to not get along. It's a creative process, and you're closed off in a room, and you're coming up with music. And you don't know it at the time, but this music is changing the world, and you're becoming famous, and everybody wants a piece of you, and it's hard. And suddenly all you have is each other. And then you look at each other, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what? I've never really been fond of the way you do that. And before you know it, fighting starts. Or how come I never get my songs on the album? It's always Lennon McCartney. How about George Harrison saying, can I get a couple on there? Or Ringo saying, I got a good idea, or whatever. Yeah. But it got to the point where it was just, yeah. But out of that came some of the most amazing music ever. And in co-hosting in radio or in television, I do believe there's an element of sameness to that, in that you're got a closed door in a studio, and for 4 hours, we got to be creative, play some music, and come up with some stuff. And there's going to be days where we're not going to like each other, when we're sick of each other, when we notice the habits of each other are getting on our nerves. But out of that is going to come some great creativity. The hard part is when it's all over, and you realize you got to go do it again, and the person that you're working with is not exactly, although they've got all manner of talent, not exactly what you need in that studio, and we got to do it all again the next day, and it can be super exhausting. When you work with somebody that gets it, or gets you, more like it, and you get them, then it's pretty good. And Colleen and I have had, she would say, thousands of gut laughs before we ever even turned on the microphone. It was just crazy good. And we came from different backgrounds that were almost the same in a lot of ways. So we brought a lot of the same things to the table and understood each other when we had one of those days or whatever. It's like, it's a relationship, and relationships take work, and there's going to be a lot of, push and pull in a relationship. But if you can sort of balance that out, and you end up working with somebody that, you would say, yeah, in a minute, I would work with you again, then you got something.
Who is your broadcasting hero? Who did you learn the most from?
There are names that wouldn't mean anything to you, but if you grew up in Winnipeg around the same time that I did, there was a guy named Casey Fox that did a drive show in Winnipeg on my favorite station, CFRW. It's an AM station. So this is mid-'70s. I knew I wanted to do radio when I was a kid. I was really lucky. Like when I was 7 or 8, I was fascinated with the radio and convinced that, and wondered how they get all those bands in the studio. The band would play a song, and then another band would come in and they'd set up and they'd play the next song. I had no idea about records or anything like that. I thought it was just all live studio performances. And being fascinated by that announcer, I can still see this transistor radio on the top of our bread box in our kitchen in our Winnipeg apartment. We're gathered around the table eating as kids, and my mom's getting coffee ready or whatever. And this voice is coming out, and I remember being like mesmerized by that. I don't even know this guy, and he's sitting at our kitchen table almost like, this is so bizarre. And I thought, what a great gig. And I never thought for a moment that I could do that, because I thought it was for special people. Like I thought you needed a special skill, you needed a special voice or whatever. And I thought, no, there's no way, but I loved it. So I'd make my own charts, and I'd pretend I'd be recording my own shows, and anyway, so as I grew up, I listened to radio very closely just for the announcers. And Casey Fox was one of them, who was always funny. Dick Reeves did the morning show at the time. He was funny. Ron Abel, who's no longer with us, did a morning show. Lee Marshall on middays. I remember a friend of mine, John Smith was his name. We used to hang out all the time in Winnipeg, and every so often hop the bus and go to either Eaton's or the Bay, just for the hell of it, just to wander around. So we're hopping on the bus. One day we go to the Bay, and at another radio station, CKRC, there's this announcer. This is an on-location thing. Back when remotes were something, you would bring a whole setup, your songs, your records, the whole mic. You'd have a little mini booth in the middle of a store, and you look like, let me tell you something, for a guy that loved radio, that was my celebrity sighting. That was like, oh my God. So this guy's name was John Keogh. had a voice that was just pure and deep. Long hair, huge stash, you know, kind of a skinny little rock star looking guy.
Yeah.
And me and Jen are walking a little bit closer to him, and he's just putting on a 45, and it's The Who, I Can't Explain. He's putting it on, and he's singing along to it, but in his deep voice. It's Can't Explain, Can't Explain. And I'm thinking, you are so cool. But we're just standing there staring at him. And I remember he looked at both of us and he said, "Where are you guys from?" We both looked at each other and said, "Winnipeg." He goes, "Yeah, no shit. What part?" Even in his trash talk, he is so cool. And I thought, I want to be that guy.
Johnny Fever.
So those guys are, they meant a lot to me. And my style was a combination of ripping off a bunch of people. Everything from Johnny Carson to Dave Letterman to radio guys to stand-up comedians. And I tried to take a piece of all of that and try and come up with something. And for years and years and years, when I listened back to those shows, it was just terrible, but you could hear somebody trying to find a spot, right? Trying to find. And then, you know, I guess it's because you get old and you get all philosophical, or you start to give it a little bit of thought and you realize that the voice you were looking for was always inside you. You just needed to let it out, right? And you didn't know how to let it out. And then eventually it does come out and you realize, holy shit, so this is what I was it took me this long to figure it out. And once that happens, you're like, okay, I think I just might have found the secret to successful radio, being a success in radio, and that's wait for that voice to come out no matter how long it takes.
And then do you stop doubting yourself too at that point?
No, not at all. I am still the greatest doubter in the world. I have, you know, through any number of, you know, reasons in growing up, I didn't have the greatest childhood, and I went through some pretty traumatic things, and out of those traumatic things come, you know, the baggage. And the baggage for me has always been, I'll never be good enough. You know, it'll always be, you can be that much better. That was good, but yeah, you're really good at that, but you know, and never take yourself too seriously to the point where, you know, I still have difficulty giving myself credit for stuff. And although I am very appreciative of everything that has been brought my way, I still have trouble letting it in, you know, and letting it and being able to say, you know, hey, good job. That was good. Good for you. But it's also what keeps me going. And, you know, I guess there's one thing to say, if you say you never be good enough, you're always striving to find that good. So, I mean, it could go the other way, right? And in this way, I feel like I'm, you know, I'll always be striving for that something. Maybe I don't achieve it. Maybe I die without achieving it inside, but I know that along the way, I've touched a lot of people, and that's,
you have,
that's pretty good.
You need to know that. You need to know, like, how inspiring you are to so many and how much you've inspired me over the years. And I thank you for that. I thank you
That's so sweet of you. Thank you
for everything you've done with the show, and you're just incredible, and I appreciate you.
You know what? I'm gonna respond with a yeah, but.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. But
I
Naomi, that is so sweet of you. That's so sweet of you to say, and thank you. I'm like, I love, I love to talk and tell stories, and but the thing that gets me each and every time is reconnecting or connecting with somebody that I've never met, and then at the end of the conversation have that, this has been fun, man. And now it's like, I know if I come out to Edmonton and I see you, we're having a coffee. Like, I mean, it's, you know, and that did not happen 24 hours ago. So, I mean, that's pretty freaking cool. So,
yeah.
You know, and I love the I love TO hat, by the way. Nice touch.
I caught this back in, I've only been to Toronto once, and it was 2004. It was shortly after the SARS crisis.
Right. Yeah.
And so Roots made these hats to raise money at the time, I believe. I think that was what it was for. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I dug it out of the closet about a week ago, and I started wearing it on here, and I was like, yeah, show some pride again in your country. And
that's it. I remember that. Remember the Stones came out? We had the SARS concert, had the Stones and AC/DC and the Guess Who, and it was like, yeah. And now SARS seems like the common cold compared to what we're going through right now. Like, it's crazy. We're in a science fiction movie right now. Like, it's just bizarre.
Yep. And you say to yourself, like, is this real life?
I know,
What
I
is
know.
going on?
And how about, like I said today, and then all of a sudden you have murder hornets, right? Now all of a sudden everybody's talking about giant hornets that can kill you. And I'm like, yeah, okay,
Right.
whatever. Yeah, 2020, it's only May and it's a dumpster fire. So let's just keep throwing stuff in there. What the hell?
I know. And I'm like, what's next month? Let's see
Yeah,
what's going to
for
happen.
sure. For sure. I believe with all of my heart, and really maybe it's not so much belief, it's more hope with all my heart, that there's some awesome things coming, because this has been a giant reset. And I would like to think that out of this reset comes maybe a different way of thinking, different way of conducting yourself, different way of respecting your fellow human beings, you know.
Mhm.
I hope beyond hope, because we all know that, you know, there's going to be a certain element of going back to the same, but going back to the same is going to be a long, slow process right now. So I'd like to think that we're going to learn something out of this and be just a little more compassionate, a little more empathetic to people.
I really hope so.
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to wrap things up with just a couple silly questions for you.
Sure. Boxers or briefs?
When you think, it's funny, when you think of the 90s,
Yeah.
and you think about the fashion trends and the
Right.
toys and stuff, what's one thing that pops in your mind that was something that you loved?
That I loved in the 90s.
Yeah.
So for me, the 90s in the sort of post, like the post 90s, the 96 to the 2000s was kind of a musical blur for me.
Mm.
And it was sort of hard to really dig what you were listening to, because there was so much different. I mean, you had Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls and NSYNC on one side, right? And then you
Mhm.
had they're calling them minivan rock now, you know, the Third Eye Blinds and the
Matchbox 20 and those
Matchbox 20. Yeah, you know, and you have them, and then over here you've got, I don't know, you still have the Seattle sound to a certain degree, and you've got some serious metal. So it was kind of hard to really. It was really a vomit of music there, and I mean, a lot of it was good. A lot of it was just seemingly manufactured, but it was interesting.
Mhm.
But as far as, I'm trying to remember like a '90s style that I got behind. You know, I did love the colorful jackets, and when we did the 500 show, I had a purple polyester thing that would just knock your socks off, and I remember wearing that on the show, and I see it now, because I was sent a copy not that long ago, and I'm thinking, yeah, man, you could tell you love that jacket. So anything that had a
Mhm.
lot of color to it, and I love the untucked shirt aspect. I mean, the untucked shirt and the sleeves pulled beyond the sleeve of the sweater, like the cuffs pulled beyond the sweater and just kind of hanging
Yes,
out. I really like that look. And
I love
because
it.
there's a lazy person's look, right? So it's like, you know, throw it out. But as far as the toy, the Nintendo Entertainment System, I played the Legend of Zelda, the first Legend of Zelda that came out. And I'm
Mhm.
not a gamer now at all. I watch my boys play, and I'm like, I cannot compete. There's just no. You guys are so good, and I am so not. But this NES system, the original NES system, I played Zelda, and it was the only game I ever wrapped. And I was in Edmonton when I wrapped it,
Oh.
and I had a 1-900 number that I could call. That there were people who played the games that you could talk to. You'd be on hold forever, but you could call and say, I'm playing The Legend of Zelda. I'm in level 11 and I can't beat the whatever the hell. What do I do? And I would never have figured it out without them, because they said things like, yes, shoot the arrow, but you need to jump and shoot the arrow at the same time. Like, who would know how to do that? And so you get that
Oh.
advice, you'd wrap up the level and then go on to the next one. It was like, yeah.
See, I
So
didn't know that number existed, and I bet you my mom didn't want me to know because you said 1-900.
1-900, there's a cost to it, right? And you know they were talking slow, right? To try and keep you on as long as possible. What's that level again? Can you spell that for me?
Mm.
But yeah, and I remember, so NES in the beginning of the 90s, and Game Boy was a go-to for me. And I'll remember that fondly for sure.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to start asking a lot of my Canadian guests because
Okay.
it's silly. It's near and dear to my heart, though.
Okay.
Where do you think Chris Shepard is hiding? Like,
I,
this guy.
yes. Yeah, I think, you know what, in a situation much like mine right here, right now, somewhere under the steps, in a, in a household, in a drywalled 2x4 room, that's where he is. Isn't that crazy?
I'm trying to find the guy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is he still beat mixing? Like Who knows, man?
I've done an
That guy was
episode on
something.
him. I've done an episode on him because when I was a preteen, I had a song that I had recorded and I won a contest on Power 92. I got the song into on a compilation and he was the one who remixed it with BKS. And so I was
Wow.
just a kid and it
Uh-huh.
was mind blowing the fact that I got to meet him, but not only got to meet him, but he would like invite me to stuff when he was in Edmonton. He'd be like, "Hey girl, come on down. I'm teaching a seminar. Come on down." Or he'd do like,
Ridiculously nice.
yeah,
Ridiculously nice. Yes, I remember that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like the Rockin Ride at West Edmonton Mall. He'd be there and he'd be like, "Oh, how you doing? How's your mother doing? Come on
Yeah,
down." You
yeah,
know?
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. That's a great question. I don't know. Let me know if you find him though.
Okay, I
Yeah.
will. You are amazing, and thank you for your time today.
Oh man, Naomi, it was my pleasure. Thank you for thinking of me. It's always, first of all, it's always nice to be thought of, and it's always nice to sit with somebody that's gonna let you ramble on storytelling. It's okay with me. Thanks so much.
No, I really appreciated it, and it was an absolute joy. So, I'll let you know when the episode's coming out.
Please do.
And yeah, I'll tag you in all the social media and everything. And
Great. And I'll make sure I do it on my end too. I appreciate it.
okay, thank you, Stu.
Mad love. See
All
ya.
right, you too. Thanks.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.